So was this entirely human error then?
Well, I don't think so. It was certainly human error on many levels, but they blame the pilots, and rightfully so, because they did have limited piloting skills in an emergency. They should have been able to recover from a stall. However, the report's very thorough, and I've had a chance to read the report, and the report details a horrible failure in maintenance. This particular computer had failed 23 times in the previous year, including one time when it failed. It set the plane literally on its side. It did a 104-degree turn, which just put the plane more than at a 90-degree angle to the ground. And still, they kept sending this plane back out with this part only repaired. And I went back and checked the manuals, and at least in the United States, that part would have had to have been replaced unless it was emergency and you just couldn't get it. So a total failure of maintenance. And the ground crew at AirAsia had actually shown the pilot in previous occasions when this happened to him before, how to pull the circuit breaker and do this in flight and reset it, which shouldn't have been done. So failure of maintenance, failure of piloting skills, and failure of the airplane itself, because one pilot was pushing the nose down and one wanted the nose, was pushing the nose up, and the other wanted the nose down, which is how it should have been. So lots of blame to go around.
And I've, often over the last several years, and I don't know if it's coincidental, we've heard stall issues in planes and pilots not necessarily able to then get the plane to do the right thing to correct a stall, right? So, I mean, is it a case, too, that when a computer fails, pilots just aren't used to flying a plane entirely manually anymore? Is that something airlines have to look at?
You are exactly right. And that has been a theme that has resonated through many crashes, some in the U.S., some in other parts of the Air France. That was a theme that was resonated there. And what happens, and the report states it, it's tough to read, but the report says that when they switched off the autopilot, which happened when they pulled the circuit breakers, that their flying skills couldn't keep up with the emergency situation. Now, they shouldn't have been in that emergency situation anyway. That was because of poor maintenance. But that in this crash and many others, the pilot's hands-on manual flying skills are not up to the task when an emergency happens. And for that, the report wisely advocates additional training, not only in Indonesia, but also in Europe and the United States.
But of course, this is a low-cost airline, and you mentioned that in sort of Western established airlines, that a faulty part like that one would have been replaced and not simply repaired. And certainly I imagine that the pilots wouldn't have been told how to sort of reboot the computer while in flight, right? So for nervous flyers out there watching this, I mean, is there a way to minimize your exposure to potential problems on flight, maintenance problems? I mean, how can you check what airline is conducting the proper maintenance and which airline is not?
Exactly. Great question, because a lot depends upon your nation's rules and regulations. And in this case, they were critical, and they said that the air regulators themselves weren't as tough as they should be. They had new recommendations for the regulators themselves in Indonesia and things that they should do to improve. So the best advice, because passengers can't check, you can't know what your airline's maintenance is like unless you work there, really. And so what you have to do is look for nations that follow the strictest ICAO standards. Britain, the United States, Australia, Japan, most advanced aviation nations do follow those, and they do generally have a much higher standard on maintenance.